At the beginning of the story, we see a basketball match taking place in a high school. A boy named Mason was playing in that match. Their team was losing and only 44 seconds were left in the game. So the coach told a boy named Dean to steal the ball and quickly pass it to Mason because he was the best shooter on their team. All the boys started following this plan, and soon Mason scored 2 points. But just then, his attention was drawn to a burning man in the crowd. The game continued. Dean passed the ball to Mason again, and Mason threw the ball in the last second. But just then, the burning man suddenly appeared in front of him again. He started extending his black hand toward Mason. At that exact moment, the ball also went into the basket, and their team won the match. In joy, Mason was surrounded by his teammates. But a frightened Mason quickly ran toward the changing room and felt goosebumps rising on his hand while opening his locker. He started throwing all the stuff out, and finally something strange got stuck in his hand. Just then, a voice slowly whispered his name, and out of fear, Mason started looking for a cattle bell. At the same time, the burning man also appeared there. Now Mason started begging for mercy from him. But when he did not stop, Mason broke that thing into pieces. Then his gaze went toward the door. He saw his teammates coming in and took a breath of relief. Later, while bathing, Mason heard a strange sound. He looked down and saw something like ash. Then, just as he turned around, the burning man grabbed his neck and put his hand inside his throat, which caused Mason's body to also catch fire. When his teammates heard his screams, they all ran toward the bathroom and saw Mason burning. 6 months later, we see a girl named Chris who was moved in with her cousin. She was sitting on the windowsill making a sketch, but suddenly she started getting lost in her thoughts. She started staring at the ground as if dark thoughts were entering her mind like darkness. But then, her cousin brother Ray brought her back to her senses and said he would help her set up her belongings. Later reaching school, Ray started showing Chris around the school. Just then, his eyes fell on a girl named Eli. Chris was given a locker on which the word horse was written. Then Ray mentioned that this used to be Mason's nickname. Then Dean and his teammates surrounded Chris. They started saying not to use this locker out of respect for Mason. But then, a girl named Grace stepped in between. She started saying that this school is very old. By that logic, everyone whose lockers were here, they are all dead. Does that make any sense? Seeing Grace, Ray tried to flirt with her, but poor Ray was unsuccessful. At the same time, Dean found out that Chris was new to the school. He started saying that he had heard a rumor that you came out of a rehab center. You killed your own father, didn't you? Just then, Eli stopped him saying, "Don't talk all this nonsense." But Dean kept making fun of Chris. Getting angry at this, Chris gave him a powerful kick on his groin. Just then, Mr. Craven arrived in the hallway and in anger expelled Chris, Dean, Grace, and Ray from college for a few days. When Eli tried to defend Chris, she was also expelled for a few days. Then, when everyone left, Eli tried to befriend Chris. But Chris said, "I don't need your help." After Eli left, Chris opened the locker and found many of Mason's things, among which was also that mysterious thing which he had broken. Hearing a whispering voice, Chris decided to open it, and a whistle came out from inside it. Chris was about to blow it when the bell rang and she left for her class. In the afternoon, Chris arrived late for class. When she placed her bag on the table, the whistle slipped out of the bag. Dean thought it might be a smoking pipe and told Craven about it. Meanwhile, Kevin looked carefully at the whistle and started saying that it seems like some kind of musical instrument, and he tried to figure out what it was by looking at the letters written below. When Craven read these strange letters, Grace started searching for them on the internet, which revealed that it means calling the dead back. To estimate its value, Craven said that I will keep this whistle with me. He also told that Chris had found it in the school locker. He asked all students to leave quickly and also gave them an essay to write. After the children left, Craven searched online about that whistle and found out that this whistle is very expensive. That is why he made a plan to sell the whistle. But just then, he heard a whispering voice calling his name, which forced him to blow the whistle. Craven did just that, and immediately a crack appeared in the window, which scared him greatly, and he put the whistle back. But before leaving the classroom, he finalized the deal to sell the whistle online. Outside, Grace told everyone to meet later. Then, when everyone else left, Ray told Chris that what happened with your dad was not your fault. But Chris did not want to talk about this at all. At that moment, Ray remembered that he had forgotten something, and he quickly ran back toward the classroom. There he found Craven's laptop open, in which he was checking the price of the whistle on a website. And just then, he got an idea. Meanwhile, Nova came to Chris, who was engaged in spreading his religion. Nova invited Chris to church and also tried to sell her drugs. When she didn't agree, he was also offering free samples. But at that moment, Ray came back and told Nova to stay away from his sister. But Nova easily defeated him in the fight. He threw him onto the car, and then taking out a knife, started calling himself a man sent by God, and then told Chris that if you ever need anything, I will come anytime. Saying this, he left from there. As soon as Nova left, Ray told Chris that this man sells drugs to the children who come to his church, and a year ago a child had also died from an overdose. In the evening, Craven found out that the whistle was missing from the box. He looked for the whistle everywhere but couldn't find it anywhere. Then he heard a sound and thought it might be the cleaning person. But when he went outside, he saw a strange figure in the darkness. Suddenly, Craven felt someone's hand on his shoulder and got scared, but it was truly the cleaning person. By then, that mysterious figure had disappeared. That is why Craven thought that maybe it was just his imagination. Then he came back to the classroom and noticed that he could see his own breath. Then, just as he turned around, he saw a scary devil whose mouth was dripping strange blood. This terrifying person grabbed Craven with both hands and crushed his lungs until he was dead. Just then, the cleaning person also passed by near the door, but he didn't see anything at all. Meanwhile, blood started coming out of Craven's mouth, and right before their eyes, Craven completely transformed into the form of a devil and fell to the ground. At Chris's house, it was found that Ray had stolen the whistle. Just then, Chris refused to have fun with them. Then Chris said, "I will just rest. You all have fun." But she could not stop herself from staring at Eli, who at that moment was injecting her diabetes injection into her leg. Chris's brother Timmy kept trying to peek into their party, but they sent him to his room. When Chris told everyone that I should leave now, Eli started trying to convince her to stay. At that same moment, Dean dared Grace to blow that whistle, and as soon as she blew the whistle, everyone covered their ears, because a painful sound echoed for a few seconds. When all this was over, Dean started asking everyone to be quiet because he was hearing something else. But just as everyone else also started listening carefully, Dean made a sound. Well, then Chris left from there, so Eli also ran after her to invite her to the Harvest Festival. She told Chris that if you come, I will be very happy. When Chris said yes, Eli left from there. Then Chris started asking Ray whether Eli likes boys or girls, but Ray had no answer to this. Reaching home, Chris wanted to message Eli, but couldn't figure out what to do. None of her ideas seemed good to her. Just then, suddenly, she saw someone standing on a tree outside her window and started getting scared. But then she was startled by Ray suddenly entering the room. Then when she looked at the tree again, there was no one there. At that moment, her phone rang with a message from Eli, and seeing this, Chris got a little nervous because in a joking manner, she had accidentally sent a flirty message to Eli. But Eli liked the message. Just then, Ray took the phone and to help his sister started sending sweet messages to Eli. On the other side, when Dean also left, Grace started writing her essay. But she kept hearing voices again and again as if someone was whispering her name. But she thought maybe Timmy was joking. But when she saw the light going off in her brother's room, she understood that it was not Timmy making these sounds. Then suddenly, a scary creature ran from behind her, and she saw her name being whispered again. Now she started following the voice. She checked behind the table, but there was nothing there. At that moment, a scary hand touched her, and when she turned to look, Timmy was standing there. Grace thought that Timmy is so far away, how can he touch her? The next morning, the principal gathered all students for assembly and gave information about Craven's death. The cause of Craven's death was stated to be lung cancer. Just then, Eli saw a girl sitting in front of her trembling, and her neck suddenly broke. Then that girl started turning her head around, showing a scary face. She was also whispering Eli's name. At that moment, Grace gave that whistle to Chris, and Eli came out of her hallucination. Now that scary girl had disappeared. After class, Eli and Chris went to Mason's house because they thought maybe Mason's family would want his whistle back. They knocked on the door, but it was already open. The girls went inside, and while listening to old music started looking at the old and valuable things kept in the house. Suddenly, Mason's grandmother Ivy came behind them. Without any greeting, she started getting angry at them. She believed that she had traveled the world to acquire old things. She had studied different civilizations to know how people deal with death. On a table, there were many medicine bottles. When Chris tried to give her that whistle, saying that I found it in Mason's locker. But Ivy started saying that now it is yours because you found it, just like it was once found by me and Mason. Many years ago, I found this whistle in a narrow alley in Guatemala. Since then, this cursed whistle has killed my daughter, my son-in-law, and now my grandson too. The correct meaning of the mark written on it is calling your own death. When someone is born, their death is born with them too, but it comes at its own time. But if anyone hears this whistle, then their death comes very quickly, and then nobody lives long. Then Ivy gave that whistle back to Chris and said you should not have taken it. Then in the evening, the girls arrived at the hospital records room. Eli believes that Mason's death was strange because he literally burned while bathing. But still, this incident was named a gas leak. On checking the file, it was found that he was even identified by his teeth because his body had burned too much. At that moment, someone came into the room and the girls hid behind the cupboards. Just then, Mason's reports fell and Chris picked one up and read that according to the bone structure of the body, it was 45 to 50 years old. This made it clear that there was something in Ivy's story. This meant that Mason's death was supposed to happen from a gas leak at around age 48, and Craven was supposed to get cancer later. Now the girls had to tell this to others too. That is why they quietly left before seeing the other employee papers. At the Harvest Festival, everyone is in their costumes. Just then, Ray found Grace and finally told her that I like you. But Grace gently turned him down by kissing his cheek and then left to meet her boyfriend. Dean started making fun of Ray's costume, and our poor heartbroken lover Ray started drinking alcohol. When Eli and Chris came there, Nova tried to bother them and started calling them strange names. But then Eli gave him a powerful kick on his groin, and in retaliation, Nova took out his knife. But Chris put her foot on his hand and took the knife from him. Then Chris placed the knife on his nose and started mentioning the one who died of overdose. But Nova started saying, I don't know anything. Hearing this, Chris cut his nose and then threw the knife away. Meanwhile, Dean and Grace got separated in a maze where people in costumes kept trying to scare them. Dean found a wooden round board and spun it. The result said that you decide your own fate. Just then, Grace was completely stunned in the maze when she saw an old woman surrounded by miraculous light. When that old woman called her name, Grace walked away out of fear. But then she met that same old woman again. Grace immediately ran and called Dean for help. But Dean thought someone in a costume was scaring her. Suddenly, the old woman scared Grace and knocked her down, which also caused her phone to fall. Grace picked up a shovel. Just then, the old woman raised her hand and pointed toward behind Grace. And when Grace turned to look, the same woman was seen standing behind her. Then screaming, she attacked the woman and both fell to the ground. When Grace came to her senses, she touched her bleeding forehead and realized that she had gotten the same shovel injury that had hit the old woman. Then the old woman started smiling and stood up by twisting her body. She started chasing Grace. Grace started running as fast as she could. On the other side, Dean also started getting worried because Grace was not answering the phone. Then Dean started looking for her here and there. Grace became even more nervous when she got trapped in a dead end. But fortunately, she found a hidden cave in the wall and crawled inside it. But the old woman came after her soon and grabbing Grace's leg started inserting her scary fingers into her foot. Then she put her hand in Grace's throat, which caused her body to start changing. Grace freed herself and kept moving forward until she reached the middle of the maze. But unfortunately, that old woman appeared on a light pole and the old woman kissed Grace to transform her. But by the time Dean arrived, Grace had already become an old body full of wrinkles. Later inside the school gym, Dean refused to accept that that body was Grace's. Just then, the girls told what Ivy had said, and both of them believed that they had felt death coming near them. Dean still wasn't accepting this. Just then, Ray reminded him that it was you who dared Grace to blow the whistle. So by that logic, you are also the reason for her death. In anger, Dean pushed him and also made fun of the fact that he loved Grace, due to which sad Ray ran away from there. A little while later, drunk Dean entered his room through the window. When he looked in the mirror, he saw a man whose body had terrible marks of injuries. He stepped back in shock and accidentally broke the lamp kept in the room. Then he ran to turn on the main light, but by then, that man had disappeared. Just then, Dean's parents started knocking on the door asking what was that sound. To this, Dean said, I was just dreaming. Just then, his angry father started scolding him for drinking and drunk driving. He started saying that one day your behavior will get you killed. During this at Chris's house, she told Eli that a year ago I had overdosed. My father was hurriedly taking me to the hospital in his car, but on the way, he had an accident with a truck, and he died on the spot. Sometimes I think that it would have been better if I had ended instead of Dad. Just then, Eli consoled her with a kiss, and the two came closer to each other. On the roof, Ray sat in the rain and started thinking about Grace. Suddenly, he saw blood on his hands and on a teddy bear and then going inside a body-crushing machine. But all this had only happened in his mind. The next day, Ray and the girls went to meet Ivy, who was lying ill in bed. She told them that if this calamity has to be stopped, then they will have to transfer their death to someone else. When Chris made marks on them with her blood and looked in the mirror, she saw her death standing right behind her, which also had a weapon in its hand. As soon as it disappeared, Ivy died in her bed. After this, the three of them think about what should be done. Ray wants to pass his death forward. But in Eli's eyes, this was bloodshed and she was against it. They started arguing over this, and Ray left alone from there. At home, Dean saw the news of Grace's death and turned off the TV. He still couldn't believe that Grace was dead. Just then, suddenly, his room door opened slightly and a scary hand started peeking into the room. Dean threw a chair at the door, because of which his parents also came there. Dean quickly closed the door so they couldn't come in. Then suddenly, things in his room started moving on their own, and Dean's death came out and grabbed his head. Now his body started moving like a car accident. All the wounds slowly started appearing on his body. His bones started breaking and his body's organs stopped working. By the time his parents broke down the door and came inside, Dean was already lying on the floor as a corpse. During this time, Chris and Eli came to look for Ray in his room, but he was not there. They found photos in the room where he used to work at a steel factory and a comic book in which a hero was killing a bad person, which was perhaps a clue. Inside the church, Ray saw Nova saying goodbye to the children. Then, when everyone left, Ray went inside the church and he also had a gun in his hand. And first he shot the flower pot so he could show Nova that he was not joking. Just then, suddenly the church bell rang and Ray got distracted. Just then, Nova pounced on him and a fight broke out between the two. Ray fell down and Nova took the gun in his hands, but when he tried to fire the gun, it stopped working. Seeing this, Ray hit Nova with a tray to knock him unconscious. Later, when Nova came to his senses, he found himself tied up that too in a steel factory. After this, Ray took out the drugs from his pocket and forced Nova to take them out. Then Ray drew a little blood from his hand, and with the other hand took out the whistle, which gave him goosebumps. When Ray started making marks with blood on Nova, just then the girls arrived to stop him. But he pointed the gun at them and told them to step back. Nova started begging for mercy, and the girls also started saying, "Don't do this." After hearing all this, Ray pulled his hand back. Just then, Ray started saying that everyone has to die once, and hearing this, Chris got an idea. At that moment, Ray heard his name, and an unknown force pulled his injured hand. The gun also fell from his hand. The girls tried to save him by grabbing him, but now it was too late. His body started breaking as if he was meant to die in the machine. When only half of his body was left, it was torn to pieces. Seeing this, Nova fainted. Seeing the gruesome death of her brother, Chris was also very scared, and Eli had to comfort her. She reminded her that you had an idea. What was it? Now the girls quickly ran toward Eli's car and reached the hospital. Then Chris started explaining her plan. Using insulin, which stops blood sugar, they can stop the heart, and then by giving another injection, they can revive each other. It will be just like dying. But maybe this method will keep our death away from us. Both of them brought all the supplies inside the building, where Chris sees her death waiting for her. Using factory supplies, the girls made all the preparations and also closed the door. Chris wanted to save Eli first, but Eli surprised her by injecting an insulin injection in her arm, which made Chris understand that her death is showing this very moment. Chris's body fell into a tub of cold water like ice, and Eli kept her there until her heartbeat stopped. As she was dying, Chris mentally apologized to her family. Then Eli took Chris out and gave her an injection and then started using electric shock. Chris almost woke up, but her death took over her mind. She wanted to keep her dead. Helplessly, Eli started doing CPR, but death had tightly gripped Chris. At that moment, Nova came to his senses and he managed to free himself from the chair. After picking up the gun, he started breaking the door with a hammer. Just then, Eli's death also came forward. Her death came in the form of that same girl she had seen in the assembly. Meanwhile, Nova made a hole in the door and, putting his hand inside, started shooting bullets. He destroyed the electric shock machine, and in all this, Eli also got hurt. But he could not stop Eli from calling Chris's name again and again, which gave Chris so much strength that she could finally push death away. Chris woke up and saw Eli writhing on the ground. Her death was staring at her intently. At that moment, Nova came in and started saying that God created everyone for some purpose. He touched Eli's blood, due to which her death disappeared, and Nova's own death came forward. He fired bullets, but every bullet also started hurting his own body. He fell, and his death soon killed him. Now Chris hugged Eli. Just then, their eyes fell on that broken whistle, which had perhaps been broken by a bullet. 3 months from now, Chris sometimes felt that she could see her death, but she'd learned to live happily with Eli. During this time, another girl somehow found that whistle in her locker, and during the assembly, she took out that whistle and blew it. And with this terrifying story ended. See you in the next video.